Welcome back, Minnesota Timberwolves fans. Thank you for joining this edition of Timberwolves Today. Here on FanArt, I am your host, Mark Fiers, and I will be wrapping up the Tim Connelly Talks highlights, questions from the interview that he had on John Krasinski's podcast, which has dropped, so you can listen to the whole interview there and kind of see what I've been talking about in real time and maybe fact check me as well, as you always are apt to do. All right, first of all, Tim Connelly is talking about the Wolves' chances, title contender stuff, and he said, when we look at roster creation, trading, free agency, stuff like that, he said 5 to 6 teams have a legitimate shot to win the title this year. And so it really is an arms race between 5 or 6 teams to win. So the question then is, are the Wolves in that mix? And I want to look at this objectively. Obviously, as a Minnesota Timberwolves fan, and like Tim Connelly said in the interview, I think they can win every year. I really do think the Wolves have a chance to put together a team that could make it to the Western Conference Finals, the NBA Finals, and potentially even win it in the right scenario. But is that realistic at this point, given it's their first year together? It's kind of a retooled team, losing, obviously, Nas, Julius, Mike Conley, leadership, no more Slow-Mo, no more Joe Ingles. Those players are gone, and so kind of a little mini rebuild. But do they crack that 5 into that top 5, top 6 team? Well, Conley's clearly talking about a big 4 who we know about. It's the Spurs. It's OKC. We get that. We accept that. We all agree to that. The New York Knicks need to be in that discussion because they won the title last year. And other than a few pieces leaving, they have roughly their core offensive guns and identity still intact. Obviously minus Mitchell Robinson, but he is someone that can be replaced in that lineup. I believe that Connelly is also talking about Boston. You have a healthy, fully healthy Jason Tatum. Clearly, they lost Jaylen Brown, but I think that can be made up because really you're looking at 2 scorers that want to have the ball in their hands at all the key moments. And now you remove some of that and you probably opens things up a little bit for a little bit more team offense. And I think Paul George can really fit well into that system. So Boston is there. So that's 4. So now can the Wolves break into that top 5? And I really see 4 teams that can be vying for that 5th spot. The team that I believe has the least likelihood of being in the top 5 is Philadelphia. Philadelphia, if healthy, and that's a big, gigantic if. Big, gigantic if. If they are healthy, their top 5 is the best starting 5 in basketball. It's talent galore. There are scorers. Defense may be a little bit suspect. But if you crack that top 5 and you get into their bench, it is a lot of trouble for that team. Guys that honestly I just have not heard of. Again, I follow the Wolves. Obviously intensely. I follow other NBA teams, but you have Adem Bona, who Dean Wade. Really, I've heard of him. Kentavious Caldwell Pope, nah. That doesn't do anything for me. Anthony Simons, clearly I've heard of him, but he doesn't move the needle at all for me. And then you have the rookie in LeBaron Phelan. And he has great upside and talent, but he's still a rookie. If any one of those players goes down with extended period of time or is gone in the playoffs, it's a gigantic crack in that armor. And so I think if healthy, they could make a run in the playoffs. I just don't see it happening. Then you have Denver. Okay. Denver still has Jokic. They have Jamal Murray. They still at this point have Aaron Gordon. They're always going to contend. The reason why I move them out of that mix is just because the pieces that were able to challenge Denver are still there. Rudy is still there. He can challenge Jokic. Jaden can shut down and get into the head and into the mind of Jamal Murray. And I actually think the way we retooled our team makes us more likely to compete. Our offense will be on par, will be better than Denver. Denver led the league in points per game last year, but we will surpass that this year. We will have the number one offense in basketball. So we're better than Denver, and we have better defense. Even losing that size of Nas and Julius, who were at times definite defensive liabilities, we're a better defensive team than Denver, and we will be a better offensive team than Denver. So I move them out of that mix. The only other team that I can see push us for being the fifth best team in basketball are the Los Angeles Lakers. They have a brand new team, retooled team, a lot of new pieces on there. But I think if you can get a healthy Luka and a healthy Austin Reeves, that is a very dangerous team. Luka healthy, that is his show now. That can be definitely very dangerous, and it's something that the Wolves, I really, I think they could have trouble with that team because of Luka, because of how he plays. Um, let's look at the rest they got at their depth chart. you know, Quentin Grimes, Jake LaRavia, and Walker Kessler. Okay, Kessler and Rudy can battle it out. We have the edge at the guard or the forward spot, but Colin Sexton, Looney, Mamuskelashvili coming off the bench. They got Thibault, Jared Vanderbilt. I think they're a team that could be sneaky, right? They're a team that the Wolves could look past. And get bitten by. And I can see games during the regular season, which don't matter, but I could see games when Luka and Austin put up 40 on us, just because that's what we've done. So I do think that is definitely a possibility. However, because of the depth, because of just the frontline talent, again, Lakers could challenge for that fifth or sixth, but I really see the Wolves being a top five team in the NBA. Houston, yes, they're going to have talent, but I think we're just top to bottom a better team. Cleveland, yes. Detroit, yes. They're all teams that could fit into that mix, but I just think the Wolves, even though this is the first time, we're going to see this version of the Wolves and this version of Anthony Edwards, this version of Chris Finch's new offense. I do think that the Wolves have a chance, a very good chance to move up. But given the fact that they've never done this with this lineup and we don't know exactly how LaMelo will fit into the system, we can project, we can guess that it's going to be really good, but it could go south. LaMelo could get hurt. If Rudy gets hurt, we're screwed. And so as most teams, you have one big injury and it's going to derail your season. But the Wolves could be in that situation too. If it's Rudy, even if it's Ant, if it's LaMelo, I could put a big hurt on what we're trying to do. All right, I'm moving on. One other point that I wanted to bring up from that Conley interview, which I thought was very interesting, was he made a comment about trading and working with teams. And he used an example. He said, yeah, we contacted one team and they said they had 4 untradeable guys. And I was like, man, come on, you're a 37-win team. You can't have 4 untradeable guards if you just lost or just only won 37 games. And I thought that was kind of funny, a little bit of shade at a team. That's how I interpreted his comments, that if you have only won 37 games, everything should be on the table. All your players should be on the table. And I get that. It made me wonder, is he just throwing out a random number, 37? Or was there a legitimate team that they were talking about that only had 37 wins? So I went through back last year, went through the standings, and there was only one team in the NBA with 37 wins last year, and that was the Golden State Warriors. So truly, if Conley was taking a shot at the Golden State saying, nope, nope, you can't touch our players, who were they, right? Here's their roster of players that they have, right? Steph Curry, clearly he's not going anywhere. Unless it was something massive, right, where he's teaming up with LeBron or some other, megastar team. He's untradeable. But then what do you, Jimmy Butler, you don't think he's tradable? Draymond Green, Axel Lendenberg, who you just drafted, Brandon Podziemski. There's literally no one on that team other than Steph Curry that is untradeable. And it is absolutely laughable if true, this is only speculation, that if Tim Conley was really not pulling that number 37 out of his arse, if he was taking a jab at the only 37 win team being Golden State, and they said, nope, we're not trading these guys. We're not trading Draymond. We're not trading Jimmy Butler. I know we're not going after Jimmy Butler. Kristaps Porzingis. Okay. Now, who would the Wolves be going after from that team? I have no clue. Maybe it was Draymond Green. Maybe there was a scenario where we made some sort of crazy trade, 3-team, 4-team trade to bring Draymond here to play our four. I would not be a fan of that at all, but maybe that's who they were calling about. I don't know. Maybe it was Al Horford, who would probably actually fit kind of well into our system. But again, just speculation, just a tiny little nugget in there in his interview. Was he actually throwing shade at another team? All right. Yahoo Sports. I know I read the comments. You guys are concerned that I'm just following every single trade rumor out there. And I just do it because it's things to talk. It's stuff to talk about in the Wolves, right? We're in the dead zone. They're back from Paris. Guys are all doing their thing. Ant's going to the Philippines. There's not a ton to talk about. So there hasn't been a lot of movement. And specifically with Kuminga, it had come out, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago that Jonathan Kuminga was not. He was not going to settle for a 1-year contract, prove it deal. He wanted a long-term contract, a 3-year, 4-year contract. The fact that he is still on the market lets me know, or at least speculate, that he's not getting that 3-year contract, that 4-year contract, or even a 2-year contract. And that if he goes to a team this next season, it will have to be on a 1-year contract. It's going to be vet minimum, and that's going to be a huge gut punch to him. But given his position and the apparent lack of interest in him as a player, that leaves 3 teams, as Yahoo Sports reports, that are interested in his services, and that would be the Lakers, the Wolves, and the Cavs. We are the best team of those 3. And we have the most playing time for him to come in and start and carve in his role. And that is going to give him the best opportunity. Being on a winning team, playing in the playoffs, and having a starting role, that is what will get him the most money in his next contract. So if it's money, if the Lakers are willing to go $8 million a year, a multi-year contract, the Cavs are willing to go 5, 6, 7, $8 million a year, we can only do like 3.5. It's somewhere around there. But if Lakers, Cavs, and Wolves all come in at 3.5 at the same dollar amount on contract and 1-year contract, he has to pick the Wolves. All right, that is just his best career move. Kalshi has the Wolves at 25% right now. I think that's probably right, given the fact that we have the least flexibility of those 3 teams. But we have about 5 weeks before training camp and preseason start. So things are going to happen in this next month. And maybe teams will wait till that week before training camp to make the move. So we might be sitting wondering for the next month what's going to happen with Jonathan Kuminga, because right now I think the teams have all the leverage. And they're just going to wait it out. They're going to wait it out, and every day that goes by, his salary is going to drop. His projected salary is going to probably drop by like 125,000 a year. And so if it gets to that point and he gets down into that $3.5 million, whatever it is range, I think the Wolves move in and scoop him up. Because, well, they'd scoop him up, but he'd be scooping us up. He'd be getting a scoop of Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball. That's what he'd be getting. So, last point, I am going to hit the mailbag. Fan reaction. Tyler Anderson. Thank you for commenting. Tyler says it's at Tyler Anderson XL6HB, whatever that means. But Tyler, you disagree. You think that the committee approach to the four is a bad idea. I kind of agree with you. Not fully. I see advantages to it, but I just don't know what the other options we have at this point are. I think if there was a trade, the trade would already be done. Could something open up last minute? Of course, but I think Tim Conley acts quick when the opportunity arises, and I don't think that opportunity has arisen. I don't think they want to trade Dante DiVincenzo. I just really don't. They're a little bit hamstrung in what they can trade with Josh Green, because I believe those contracts have to essentially match in a one-for-one deal. So the Wolves are in a very tough, precarious position. And so while I will agree that I don't think it is ideal, I think it is the only option that we have right now. And we're just going to wait until January, February, as the trade deadline approaches, to make our decision on what we want to do. And is this roster strong enough as it is? Part of the reason I'm saying this is a trust. Honestly, it's a trust in Chris Finch, that he can put together a rotation, a starting five, a bench, 3, 4, 5, that can come in and do the job. And do the job well enough that we can get through the first couple months of the season and see what we really got, see how much momentum is. Because if we get through the first 2 months of the season and we're sitting at number 1 or number 2 in the West, I think that changes everything. And I think that pushes us to go all in a little bit more and be even a little bit more aggressive. And that's the point at which I think you could potentially see a gigantic move. Talking about potentially, dare I say, a Jaden trade. If Iowa's hitting on all cylinders, if Josh Green is playing well, if Terrence Shannon Jr. and Jalen Clark really excel, I think that could be a blockbuster move. Otherwise, it could be moving those pieces like I just mentioned, Terrence Shannon Jr., TJ, Jalen Clark, or even, dare I say, at that point, do you trade Beringer mid-season to get an established power forward and get into that starting role if the Wolves are at the point where they feel, hey, we actually have the lineup that can win it all this year? I think Tim Conley at that point would push his chips all into the middle of the table and trade whoever he could to get what he absolutely wants, and to have put whoever is in at the 3. If you got LaMelo and Ant and you have Rudy and a legit star 4, go for it. All right. So just thinking about that right now. I'm going to have to do a little more digging on that and maybe come back to you about potential things that might happen at the trade deadline. That would be a good topic in the future. So thank you once again for joining me here on Timberwolves Today. I really do appreciate it. I love seeing the comments. Love when you interact. If I'm out in public at a Timberwolves event, something like that, again, come say hi. This has just been an absolute blast, and I hope you all enjoy coming in and checking to see what is happening in Timberwolves Nation. All right, thanks, everybody. See you again soon.